So today we're going to do a review of the Appleton Estate 12-year-old rare casks Jamaican rum. Adria is here, being Adria, of course. So this is a Jamaican rum. This brand is owned by Campari. So that's your Wild Turkey, 40 Creek, Grand Marnier company there. It's 43% ABV, 86 proof. It is chill filtered and color added. You're allowed to add color in Jamaican rum, so it is colored. That being said, you're not allowed to add sugar. Cat is shaking the camera. Darling, come on. You're not allowed to add sugar. No sugar. No sugar in Jamaican rum. It is a mix of column and pot still and is aged 12 years in ex-bourbon casks. So that's what we got on the docket today. And cat. We also have cat. What? What am I going to do with you? You're going to get furs in the rum. Oh my goodness. And of course, it being a Jamaican rum, it's a little funky. There's a little bit of funky nonsense going on. So, excuse me. Can I review this rum? No? Okay. So what I remember from this bottle is it's like big, heavy-handed molasses and rotting cabbage. Those are the notes I remember. But we'll see how we feel about it today, on this day, this glass on this day. Of course, we rate out of 100, 25 points for aroma, 25 points for palate, 25 points for finish, 10 for texture, and 15 for my personal experience. Quite dark. It is 12 years ex-bourbon in a very hot climate, so I mean, that's something. That being said, there is definitely color added here. So we're just going to wait a minute for it to kind of like... It's orange, is it? A little bit. Yeah, I don't disagree. It's a little bit orange. It is not like the dark brown sometimes you get in a heavily colored spirit, and it's not the like reddish copper necessarily. It is kind of more on the orange realm. You're not wrong. Being said, I'm bad with colors, and when we're talking about obviously a rum in this case, but a lot of scotches too, a lot of them have E150 caramel color added, as this does. I don't tend to spend too much time thinking about the color because we don't know how real it is. Now, there is the idea that the reason that they have the ability to add E150 is because that way, batches come out of the barrel at different colorations, and a consumer might think if you get a bottle of this that is maybe way lighter or way darker than other bottles that they've had, they might think that there's something wrong or the batch is better or worse or something like that. So part of the idea behind the allowed use of E150 caramel coloring is to just standardize the color so all of their bottles come out the same color, so that the consumer is kind of like, oh, this is the color I expect. There's not something weird going on where it's a light color that I don't, and maybe this is a bad batch. I don't want to buy this batch because it's lighter than the one that I like. So there is something to be said for maintaining the consistency of the color of the product. I do understand that, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure almost all of them used to add a little extra oomph to the richness of the spirit. So there's something to be said for E150, but at the end of the day, unless it's bourbon, I don't think too much about the color usually. If I know it's naturally colored, I might think a little bit about it, but unfortunately, so many scotches and or other spirits are colored that it's hard to dwell too much on non-bourbon coloration. Are you ready for it? Are you guys ready for the rotting cabbage note? I know it's not. I know the funk, the Jamaican funk in this rum is not nearly as bad as some more pungent and straight up Jamaican rums, but it definitely still is in here. There's definitely a little bit of that pungency, a little bit of that rotting cabbage note. Gotta make sure Adria didn't ruin my cleansing beverage, which seems fine. All right, so I'm still there. Yep, straight up. Um, just rotting cabbage, brown lettuce, juicy brown lettuce. But there's a sweet molasses character in there. There is a woodiness in there too, kind of an oak character. Leans a little bit into butterscotch somewhat too, so like the molasses butterscotch sweetness, a little bit of woodiness, and of course a juicy rotting green vegetable of some kind. Which not in a good way. It's rotting cabbage in a good way. It's still in a good way. Since I kind of know this is a bourbon barrel now, I'm kind of trying to look for like a little bit of like a vanilla kind of character, but not really getting much of that. It's probably like an underlying baking spice note. But not really any like tropical fruit or anything like that, at least not right at first. All right. So we're gonna try this on the palate. Get that rotten cabbage right up in our right up in our taste buds. Cheers. Actually don't get the rotten cabbage note on the palate right now. Maybe a little bit of it in the finish, but not much. Hint at best. That being said, the entry is a little thin. Then you just kind of get an overwhelming molasses character, but that's it. It's all molasses right up front, and then into the finish, kind of more rich molasses. A little bit of baking spice, a little bit of oakiness, hint of rotting cabbage note. Finish is not terribly long. Gonna go with like short plus right now. We'll see if that develops. Um, oh, Still funky on the nose, though. That being said, at the outset, not terribly complex. It's tasty. You definitely get a nice, strong, tasty molasses flavor. But so far, nothing super duper interesting going on. It's an interesting idea too. It definitely makes me think about this Woodford Reserve that we had on Saturday. Is the idea that something doesn't have to be complex, have a lot of depth, in order for it to be quite tasty. Um, so, there's different moods, I'm sure. But for example, I didn't find this Woodford double oaked particularly complicated. It wasn't like we're not plumbing the depths of any kind of wild, um, you know, complex notes, digging at some nuances or anything like that. It was kind of more straight up sweetnesses, more straight up pleasant drinking experience, and less of like a challenge or digging for buried treasure sort of thing. So, um, despite the fact that for me, I really like complexity, I really like some extra depth in my spirits. Um, I might not rate something like this terribly terribly strongly, but that doesn't mean it's not like very tasty. Like this Woodford, I think is from what I've had of it so far, absolutely delicious. But at the same time, it's not like going to rate a high score. It's going to like maybe rate a high experience score because it's like a good experience. It's tasty, but it's not complicated or complex. I'm feeling something similar in this dram so far. Is it sweet and pleasant? It's got that funky cabbage thing. You got to be ready for that. But the palate on that first sip, man, there's not much there, but it's sweet and tasty. So there's definitely an intersection between like the idea that something is a bouquet flavor bomb and being tasty. It can be tasty without being a bouquet flavor bomb. I just might not give it the best score. Because it's so sweet, so easy to drink. Molasses, slight rotten cabbage note, slight oaky note, baking spices, back palate to finish. Just all molasses. It's a molasses dram with some funky cabbage thing going on. Um, Nothing too wild. Now, for 43% alcohol, some good intensity of flavors, you get a little bit of that thinness right on the attack, though. As soon as you take that sip, you kind of get a little bit of it. Like, okay, you know, it's not the thickest thing, but when you hold it in the mouth, you do get a strong flavor. You don't have to go searching for any flavors. I guess I'm searching to see if I can find like a flavor around the edges, but it's not providing me too much nuance, which I guess is kind of what you might expect. A strong, sweet molasses flavor, maybe not a whole lot else. That being said, we're going to give it its full time to try to have some kind of development. Let it just mellow out a little bit. I don't want to like judge anything until I've taken a couple sips out of it. It's kind of like a honey brown sugar sweetness, kind of taking turns with like that kind of molasses note. You kind of have that strong, sweet brown syrup or sugar or molasses, this kind of idea, all kind of like in there, however you want to interpret it. Like it's kind of like coming across brown sugary right now, but earlier it was kind of molasses, some butterscotch, but we're calling it kind of all in the same realm here. And there's that just that vegetal note, that kind of like funky vegetal sort of note. There is an oakiness in there. It's kind of way in the back seat, which I know we've already talked about, but there's nothing too wild happening here. I'm just trying to like reiterate what I'm feeling about it. I don't feel like there's any development so far. One of the things lacking on this that I really enjoyed in other rums is like a bright fruity note, like some of those tropical estery kind of notes. I'm not getting much of that here. It's kind of all in the like brown vegetal funky cabbage realm, and not in like the tropical fruity realm. But we're going to see if we can maybe get that on the development a little bit. At least a minor sense of it. Yeah, pretty much the same. I think I have the profile at this point. Finish is really not terribly outstanding. Don't get me wrong, this is tasty to drink. You do not need to mix this. It is quite sweet and quite tasty, but there's just not a lot to like pick out of this. There's maybe like a mild hint of a tropical fruity note way at the top, but there's not much. All right. So out of 25, we're going to focus on the aroma. Decide how we feel about it. There's a couple different notes going on. None of them are terribly super duper complicated. Not hard to get. One of them's a wild kind of cabbagey note, but some good intensity. Not too complex though. Just sweet and rotting vegetation and oak. Maybe hint of a tropical fruit, hint of a baking spice. I'm going to call it 14. I feel good with 14 out of 25. All right. I'm going to focus on the palette. Try to see if I can get something in the fruit realm here. But mostly so far, it's just been like that strong molasses character into a baking spice, underlying oak, sort of oakiness, and underlying sort of like vegetal cabbage note sort of thing. Yeah, mostly just a strong molasses, some oakiness in there, some baking spice in the back palate. Slight hint of that kind of like vegetal note. Nothing too wild. I like 14 again. 14 on the palate. All right. I'm getting a little bit of like a semblance of a sweet vanilla note, but it's kind of minor. We're going to focus on the finish, which is not terribly long. Probably want to call it like medium minus. Maybe short plus is a little unfair. I'll call it medium minus. We're going to focus on it clearly this time, though. Initially, kind of a bitter oakiness. Get into like an unsweetened chocolate. Some of that molasses is on the outer edges. You also get a slight hint of that vegetal note. And it's kind of like an oaky, molassesy kind of lingerance. It's actually not too bad. Give that one a slightly better score. I think we're going to call that 16. We'll call the finish 16. Pretty good. Pretty reasonable. Now let's talk about the texture. I'm also, so far, not a super duper big fan of the texture. I feel like it's a little on the watery side. I have to decide right now if it's bad enough to be deserving a thin rating. It does come across thin to me, though. Yeah, I think I'd be lying to myself if I didn't give it a 2 or 3. I'd give it a 3. Kind of thin. That being said, despite the fact that it's thin in the mouth, it's a good flavor impact. So that's kind of a weird juxtaposition there, but good flavor impact. But the mouthfeel, the texture, a little on the thin side. All right. So out of 15, we're going to describe our experience. Pretty like tasty. I don't know if I want to use the word approachable because it does have a one challenging note in here. It does have that like rotting cabbage, funky molasses combination. There is like a brown, overripe, rotten cabbage kind of note in here. And that's a little challenging probably for someone to get into. That being said, the underlying flavors are all sweet, all pleasant, nothing poking, maybe a little drying, maybe a little bit of a dry oakiness on the finish, but pleasant to drink otherwise. And you might even become like accustomed to that kind of funky note and come to appreciate it somewhat. It is kind of an easy drinker. It is tasty. All the sweetnesses, all the rich molasses note. That being said, nothing wild going on here. Probably at best, we'll call it a 6 out of 15 as it's a distinct rum, you know. It's reasonable. It's not forgettable, but not doing anything that's wowing me. All right. That's that. Quick and easy. Quick and easy. If we had 6 and 3 is 9, let's calculator. Calculumulator. 6 and 3 and 16 and 14 and 14 is 53. 53 is good. It's barely good, you know. We staved off the okay. 53 out of 100. This is a good rum. Pretty good.